Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 25. Finding Lorraine Coven was easy. The second the shuttle crawler from the Red Corsair got us to Rutan Terminal, my brother raced to the Capital Operations Center. Flashing his identification, he got both of us in. Within a minute, we were in the manager's office, and the sweating man was pounding furiously on his computer's keyboard.
I was just following orders, Mr. Kell.
I'm certain you thought you were, Mr. Custer. But there was an error in what you did. Nick, standing beside the seated manager, laid his left hand heavily on the right man's shoulder. You say you remember a comatose woman coming off the Black Queen?
Yes, sir, I do. I remember it because orders came through regarding how we were to treat her. I was to send a message to Dr. Singh with your regrets, then turn her over to two people who gave me a password.
Custer tapped on the screen, then raked stubby fingers back through thinning hair.
See, she was turned over to Mr. and Mrs. Jones of San Dorado.
I swore. That's useless as far as identification goes. They could be anywhere in San Dorado. Custer shook his head.
No, sir, I doubt it.
I saw my brother's grip on Custer's shoulder tighten. Explain.
Well, they took her to a chopper out on the commuter side of the terminal.
And? Nick brought his face down so he could stare into Custer's beady little eyes. Where did the chopper take her?
They didn't tell me.
The computer in my head flashed a chart of Custer's rising pulse inside of my eyes, right above the graph of stress analysis of his voice. Mr. Custer, my brother is a patient man. But I'm not, and you are deceiving us.
I'm not a liar.
No, just deceptive. He asked you where the chopper took her. You replied that you were not told the destination. That does not mean you do not know where they went. It's important, Mr. Custer. My brother's voice implied a favor given for the one he was asking. That prompted Custer to smile.
Well, it does just so happen that I noticed that particular helicopter did happen to refuel twice going out and twice coming back. And the pilot said he hated the crosswinds coming off the Sumerian mountains. That means he put down at the Chapel of Eternal Vigilance.
My brother and I groaned at the same time, which would have been funny except for the circumstances that prompted it. On our briefings on the way into Mars, we had been brought up to speed on the current situation on the planet, and the chapel had figured into a few discussions. On the opposite side of the planet from San Dorado, the Dark Legion has established a huge citadel run by a Nephirite known as Saladin, constructed in territory that Imperial had taken away from Cybertronic a long time ago. The citadel remained intact because Imperial resisted any attempts to destroy the Legion by other corporations. Imperial wanted the glory of eradicating the Dark Legion for themselves, and refused to let anyone else take direct action against the citadel. Imperial did, however, allow the Brotherhood to build a proto-cathedral only 100 kilometers away from one of the citadel's outposts. I'd known it existed because my Brotherhood folks had mentioned it to me during my infiltration of the Order, despite my knowledge of its existence and location. Until Titus briefed us on it, I had no idea what the Brotherhood did there. Eternal Vigilance was an important place for the Brotherhood. They sent people out there for training in ways to become sensitive to the Dark Legion and the things it did with dark symmetry. From the way Titus Galagus had spoken of it, Eternal Vigilance was as close to a spa as the Brotherhood maintained. And being chosen to visit there was an honor just this side of having a private audience with Cardinal Duran. I looked up at Nick. We're going to have to get out there. Can you get us transport? Nick patted Custer on the shoulder. I'm sure my friend can give us transport.
I don't think so, Mr. Kell.
What?
That whole area is being quarantined by order of the Brotherhood.
Custer's pale skin took on a grayish hue.
No one is supposed to know, but there's fighting out there. Imperial is making a push, and there's been a counterattack. When they start going hard, you can feel the vibrations from the bombs here in San Dorado.
Nick looked up at me. A Brotherhood blackout must mean someone is getting beaten out there. More Inquisitors to keep peace in heaven.
Blasphemy.
Anger flushed some color back into Custer's cheeks.
No one would dare attack a chapel.
If you only knew what we know about the Dark Legion. Blackout or no, we have to get out there and get Elizabeth Walters back. She's not supposed to be there. Does Eternal Vigilance have an airstrip?
It does, but I'm not going to give you any of my aircraft to take out there.
My brother produced an identification card.
Reconsider. I don't work for you or the Waste Management Division. You could. I could have you surfing effluent waves in the tunnels below Lunacy inside 2 weeks.
Nick shook his head.
If I asked for you, my father will ask for you. And when he does, do you think transport will deny my transfer request?
Custer's head came up and he smiled.
I have friends in high places. Unless you're Winchester Raleigh's golf partner, when it comes to Mars, you'll be mine inside 6 hours. You don't scare me.
I smiled at him. Be careful, Mr. Custer. Mr. Kell is Winchester Raleigh's son-in-law. That made Custer hesitate, but his canary-eating cat grin returned quickly.
I'm happy for him. Perhaps I'll see him in a social setting when I next visit Luna.
Both Archie Kell's sons instantly read the handwriting on the wall. I got up and double-checked the door to make sure it was closed. I saw that it was and made a show of locking the door. I think you have to bring him into confidence concerning the investigation. Nick didn't miss a beat.
We've been investigating some improprieties concerning Winchester Raleigh. There is some evidence that he is looking at jumping ship from Capital to one of our competitors. Elizabeth Walters is a courier who is carrying on negotiations on behalf of Raleigh.
Custer shook his head.
But Raleigh is on Luna. Why send a courier to Mars?
I shook my head. What's wrong with you, Custer? Haven't you ever heard of a cutout or a dead drop? She brings things to Mars and leaves them here. The other side picks them up and ships them back to Luna. It's all very difficult to trace, which is the point.
What kind of stuff?
We're not at liberty to discuss that, but it is very important stuff. My brother nodded solemnly.
Very important stuff. We'd not have gotten this far except my father-in-law originally authorized the Walters trip here in my name, just in the same way he told you to send some regrets in my name to Dr. Singh. Yes?
Custer nodded.
I did think it was odd that he would send an order in your name. He thought it was clever for the mouse to be using the cat's tools. Thought he could implicate me and get me tossed off the case.
My brother took out a pen and wrote a number down for him.
In 6 hours, 6 hours after your plane takes us to Eternal Vigilance, call this number. They'll have a new duty assignment for you at a 10% raise, and you'll get boosted in the next transfer back to Luna. You'll get a new identity so Raleigh can't get to you. You're going to be important in wrapping things up and saving Capital trillions of crowns. And we don't forget our friends.
Custer's eyes brightened.
With this new identity, you're going to put a female agent on me to watch me, right? Like a bodyguard? Splendid idea. The plane we need requires VTOL, should be armed and capable of carrying 20 passengers with full combat equipment.
Nick slapped the man on the back, upsetting Custer's spectacles.
Thank you. The agent, she'll be blonde? Hair like spun gold. I'm clearing a Skyray 838 for you at the executive terminal.
Nick gave the man a thumbs up as I opened the office door.
6 hours and we'll have him.
Heading back to the holding lounge, I looked over at Nick. Custer's attitude told us that the order to send Sandra to Eternal Vigilance came from Wynn. How did he find out about Sandra being on the Black Queen?
I'm guessing he must have been notified when the council suggested turning the ship around and bringing it back to Luna. The figures Robertson were giving to argue against the idea sound like the kind of things Wynn would have put together.
If Wynn looked at the passenger and cargo manifest to try to figure out why the ship was coming back, he could have spotted Sandra's picture in the manifest. I didn't have time to dummy something up, and I didn't think it would be necessary, since all old records of her are gone. Only the fact that Wynn knew her allowed him to identify her. So why send her to eternal vigilance? Nick remained silent for a while, because he knew what my question really was. Did Wynn send her there to be helped by the Brotherhood, or to put her in a place that, at some point, had to be the subject of a Dark Legion assault? Either one of us would have defended Wynn against a charge of wanting his daughter dead, but we had been approached by him to kill her. However, that had been right in the midst of his breakdown, and he'd been a lot better since coming back from his vacation. Damn it, Nick. Winchester came here to Mars to recover from his breakdown, but he didn't do so at Eternal Vigilance. It doesn't mean he didn't make contacts here, possibly Brotherhood contacts. Nick shook his head. Wynn was never named by anyone in your investigation as being part of the Brotherhood, and he seemed as hostile to your becoming involved in it as anyone else. The Brotherhood plays the long game, Nick. Try this scenario. Winchester was down and needed support. They recruit him and help him rebuild his mind around the fact that he's their sleeper agent inside Capital. He's supposed to be there and play innocent until he moves up. If the Brotherhood managed to convert other stockholders over to their way of thinking, Winchester could have even been voted as president of Capital. That scenario is not very probable at all. Nick nodded slowly. Wynn's laying low, then he sees Sandra's image on a ship's manifest and begins to crack. He contacts someone within the Brotherhood to deal with Sandra, and she's diverted to Eternal Vigilance. And Eternal Vigilance is in the middle of a war zone. I finished my sentence as we walked into the lounge area. Mitch Hunter looked up from the seat in which he had stretched out. War zone? Yeah, war zone. Others started to gather as I answered Hunter. Turns out Our Lady isn't in a sanitarium here, but out at the Chapel of Eternal Vigilance, and it, in turn, is in the middle of a battle between Imperial and our shadowy friends. Sorry to disappoint any of you who packed your golf clubs, but we've got real work to do. Roger that, Mr. Dent. Hunter stood and stretched like a jungle cat. But you know, putting things into holes isn't that much different than putting holes into things. Shoot straight and make your shots count. It's all basics. I hope so, Mitch. I smiled, because if we hit into the rough on this one, we'll be up to our armpits in bogeys, and there's worse things out there than sand traps and water hazards. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 3, Dementia, by Michael A. Stackpole. Chapter 25, End.